Not one, but two Penn State assistant coaches are set to follow James Franklin to Virginia Tech, and some Nittany Lion fans might not like what happens next.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Now, I think Penn State's going to be fine overall, but let's break down the impact of these coaching moves. You're locked on to Penn State football here. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host as always, and thank you so much for joining me on another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network out there. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Friendly reminder to let me know your thoughts down in the comments section as we will talk about Penn State's response. We're also going to debate here because some Penn State fans, some Nittany Lion fans might not like what happens next because this is kind of an indicator of a roster turnover. Some key players that honestly I'm partial to the Nittany Lions keeping, but it's the reality of it as not one but two assistant coaches are set to join James Franklin at Virginia Tech. There's possibly a third, just starting to hear some rumors, some rumblings. But the Nittany Lions are going to lose Ty Howle, who I'm going to start with, and then Danny O'Brien. So Ty Howle is the tight ends coach, quarterbacks coach Danny O'Brien. Let's begin with the impact. So Ty Howle, I mean, it's a big loss for Penn State for a variety of reasons. My preference would have been to keep Ty Howle at Penn State. He is a Penn State alum. Okay. He showed that he could develop tight ends. He was pretty darn good at it. He gets a lot of credit for Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson, and some guy by the name of Tyler Warren. So he can develop his respective position group. Ty Howle was also one of the rising minds in all of college football, one of the rising offensive minds in all of college football. So somebody that isn't necessarily proven as a play caller yet, but as someone who can develop a game plan, scheme throughout the week, he's someone that you want in your coaching huddle, preparing for that next opponent. So the two elements there, the guy just understands the tight end position. And then being able to scheme throughout the week. But a big part of this is recruiting. I think this is the main reason why James Franklin wanted to get Ty Howle. And I'll explain something about this move because I think it's, Franklin's loyal to a fault, right? So this is a risky move here. But he's not just taking him on as an equivalent. He's not the Virginia Tech tight ends coach. He's going to be the offensive coordinator. He's going to be the play caller. He'd be a first-time play caller. That's a risky move for Franklin in his first year at Virginia Tech. I don't think it's going to cost him anything. I imagine Virginia Tech fans are going to be patient. It's really about the recruiting aspect. Okay, yeah, he's a rising mind in college football. That's great. He's still unproven as a play caller. You imagine that he'll be able to do well. But it's the recruiting that he has a pretty strong rapport in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. He was the point person for the DMV. And I think James Franklin understands that he's going to have to take a risk. He's going to have to take a gamble here to get Howle away from Penn State, his alma mater, but also somebody that just has strong recruiting ties in the DMV. So this is a comprehensive strategic move. James Franklin's motivations include getting somebody that he worked with, getting somebody away from Penn State, getting somebody who is really good at recruiting that respective area. Virginia Tech's going to focus on the DMV, as they should. I don't blame them. James Franklin has strong recruiting ties. Now you have Ty Howle on staff. Danny O'Brien would as well. And we'll talk about Danny O'Brien in just a second there. But James Franklin, again, rolling the dice on a first-time play caller and then going and getting Danny O'Brien as his quarterbacks coach. Is Franklin loyal to a fault? I mean, honestly, yes. Honestly, yes. So we'll see how this move ends up working out. I think it's the right move. I think it's worth the risk, but there is risk involved. And not everybody that's following Virginia Tech is totally on board with it. And I get that. First time play caller. It's a little underwhelming to say the least. And I'd say the same thing with quarterbacks coach hire. Danny O'Brien, he's not really proven as a QB coach at this point in time. And the recent track record here, how great did he do at Penn State? He didn't really do that well. Drew Aller never took that next step. He was also, you could give him credit because he was an assistant on the staff when Sean Clifford was there. And Sean Clifford was a good Penn State quarterback, but not a great Penn State quarterback. Drew Aller never took that next step. And Danny O'Brien was the guy that took over because Mike Yurcich was the Penn State offensive coordinator slash quarterbacks coach. And then Danny O'Brien took over from there. So if you're going off of recent results, if I'm Virginia Tech fans, I'm questioning the Danny O'Brien hire more so than I am the Ty Howle hire, because I approve of the Ty Howle hire. I would want him to stay at Penn State for obvious reasons that I just laid out. Danny O'Brien, I can understand why Matt Campbell would want to go in a different direction at the QB coaching spot, because the results don't really speak volumes right now. 5-star quarterback never lived up to his potential. Ethan Grunkemeyer, I guess, was taking strides, and I'm a big fan of Ethan Grunkemeyer. That's the indicator that we're going to talk about here, that Penn State fans might not like what this means. But it's a move for O'Brien to, I mean, good for him. He gets a reset. He gets to stay with James Franklin. James spoke very highly of O'Brien during his time in Happy Valley. Maybe O'Brien just needs a reset. Of course, he's got strong connections to the DMV. So from a recruiting angle, this makes a ton of sense. You can also kind of see that with Troy Hune, right? Troy Hune committed to Penn State, mostly because, well, yes, James Franklin, but also because of Danny O'Brien. So if he's going to Virginia Tech, Troy Hune, that quarterback commit from the class of 2026, he probably had an idea in mind that Danny O'Brien was going to join over at Virginia Tech. James Franklin is getting the band back together. And we'll see if it works out. They're definitely calculated moves. And part of it, again, is trying to get back at Penn State. Part of it, okay? You're getting former players. You're going to target former players in the transfer portal, targeted former commits. Now you're targeting coaches, okay? It's absolutely motivated to get back at Penn State in one category. The other is, yes, because you want to lock down the DC, Maryland, Virginia area in recruiting. I understand those motivations. How it translates to on the football field and the product itself, to be determined. But Penn State will be able to recover from it. We'll get to how Penn State will respond in just a moment, but I want to talk about how this is not over. It doesn't just stop at Ty Howle. It doesn't just stop at Danny O'Brien. It's honestly an indicator that fans aren't going to like when Ethan Grunkemeyer very well could be a Virginia Tech Hokie next season. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump right into that moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. Lines are available for your favorite teams. Penn State football lines are available for the game against Clemson. Clemson is an early favorite against Penn State for this upcoming bowl game. 3.5 points on the spread. So Penn State is a 3.5 point underdog. Nittany Lions plus 134 on the money line, minus 162. If you're thinking Clemson, the total is set at 48.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. That is FanDuel. The game moves fast, and so can you. And thank you for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network out there. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Nittany Lions with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and so much more. All for just $5 a month. $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonnittanylions.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. The answer is yes. The answer is yes, absolutely. Penn State players would follow these assistant coaches. Okay, at the end of the day, some Penn State fans are going to say, so be it, goodbye, don't let the door hit you on the way out kind of thing. And, I got to be honest. When it comes to, and nothing's guaranteed, but it's also more likely that these players will move on to Virginia Tech than stay at Penn State. It's a new era, new coaching staff. You want to get players that fit the vision. So if Ethan Grunkemeyer at quarterback, Luke Reynolds, Andrew Rappleyea at tight end don't exactly fit that vision for Matt Campbell, then I can kind of understand the reset there. Just know that, okay, in this era of the transfer portal and NIL, it's very difficult because I know that fans want to get attached to the players. I know that they want to root for them and everything else. Under these circumstances, it's very hard. So that's why some Penn State fans aren't going to like this, because it is an indicator. Quarterback's coach is going to go to Virginia Tech. Tight ends coach is going to go to Virginia Tech and become a play caller. Yeah, you're going to lose some Penn State players and some talented ones at that. The ones that you have to immediately watch for are Ethan Grunkemeyer at quarterback, and then both starting caliber tight ends. I know Luke Reynolds hasn't lived up to his 5-star potential, and part of that was the blocking just hadn't translated in year 2. He looked pretty darn good as a receiver at times, but when it came to blocking, just a liability. Okay, and that doesn't click for everybody. Let me remind people that I think tight end is one of the most challenging position groups to develop, because you are expected to block a 260, 270-pound defensive end and then be a wide receiver in some capacity at the same time. Tyler Warren didn't develop overnight. That was a 5-year process. My argument here is just give Luke Reynolds some grace, whether he stays at Penn State or whether he goes to Virginia Tech. He has 5-star potential for a reason. I watched him at some of those developmental camps during when he was a recruit, when he was a Penn State commit. Guy's the real deal. Give him some time. So if you're Penn State, you want to keep all 3 of those players, is what my argument is here. I think Ethan Grunkemeyer needs to be your quarterback of the future. Now, Penn State does have a strong contingency plan, which I'm not against, if they end up losing Grunkemeyer. But I think you want the guy that's been at Penn State, that was recruited by Matt Campbell once upon a time, and showed a lot of upside, showed a lot of potential once he actually settled in as a starter. Andrew Rappleyea is the real deal at tight end. He could be a captain next season, for all we know. If he stays at Penn State, if he goes to Virginia Tech, that's the kind of caliber of player that Andrew Rappleyea is. And he's the complete tight end. Once he got his footing underneath of him, once he fully recovered from that leg injury that kept him out all of the previous season, Andrew Rappleyea became that complete tight end that resembled Pat Freiermuth, Brenton Strange, Tyler Warren. Why he wasn't playing more? Did it have to do with the lingering injury, or just kind of getting back to 110%? I suppose, maybe. But he should have been playing sooner rather than later. And it's, again, I default back to it's those changes that were not made when they could have been made to save the season. That is why we are here, where James Franklin is not the coach of Penn State and Matt Campbell is, because those changes weren't made immediately. You had to wait until the season was completely over. One of those moves was promoting Andrew Rappleyea to being the starting tight end. No splitting reps with Khalil Dinkins, no splitting reps with Luke Reynolds. He was clearly the best player available at the time for that position. Use him, play him. He showed it down the stretch. You want Rappleyea. Pat Freiermuth comparisons are very easy. They both wore the same number at Penn State, 87. He can be a captain. He's truly a leader. Guy just wants to fight. Guy just wants to play ball. I enjoy listening to him in those player interview press conferences. And Luke Reynolds, I think, has so much more room to develop. If you're Matt Campbell, if you're Penn State, you try to keep those guys if you can. They very well might leave for Virginia Tech, which is understandable at the end of the day. So kind of just prepare for that expectation, prepare for that idea. But Penn State's got a response, right? We'll talk about that in just a moment. Other trends to follow here. It's not just about those couple of players. I would argue that you're going to see probably Matt Henderson go, Brian Kordovich. I mean, the tight end room could completely flip over. Would all 5 tight ends, Andrew Olish is a former 5-star, would all 5 tight ends follow Ty Howle and James Franklin to Virginia Tech? It's a possibility. I don't think that's it was a crowded tight end room to begin with. I imagine that 1 or 2 players will stay at Penn State because, again, you have Terry Smith that stuck around. Matt Campbell, I don't think is a hard coach to get along with. I think once he has some of these conversations, he will be able to he'll retain more players than we're expecting on this current Penn State roster. I think that's where I will stand. We'll still see natural roster attrition, but Campbell will be able to bridge that gap. He's not somebody that is difficult to get along with. Okay. He'll sell the vision. He'll get everybody on board. But there is that allure that with someone specifically like Matt Henderson. I mean, he's closer to home. He's from the state of Virginia. And he would get to play closer to home. He'd probably have a better opportunity, especially if, what if Andrew Olish sticks and stays behind? What if Andrew Rappleyea and Luke Reynolds? So say that's your 3 tight end base, and then you have Matt Henderson and Brian Kordovich, for example. Khalil Dinkins is moving on. So there's an opportunity for more playing time at Penn State next season when it comes to the tight end room. Ethan Grunkemeyer, though, you got to watch that. Now, Penn State's plan, and this is where we're going to get into a bit of a debate. Which move is better at the end of the day? To go with Ethan Grunkemeyer for the next 3 years or Rocco Becht for 1 year, former Iowa State quarterback? Because Becht, that's Matt Campbell's guy. How will it all unfold? And why it might be just more than Rocco Becht for 1 season. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Rugiet. Let's talk about something most men don't bring up, but absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life. It doesn't just switch off at night. And when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rugiet Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rugiet Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rugiet Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 mint that dissolves under your tongue so it absorbs fast. It's the science behind Rugiet Ready that stands out. So you have those 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 formula designed for both mental and physical readiness. You connect with a board-certified doctor online, and everything ships discreetly to your door. It's easy to understand why over 150,000 men have already made the switch. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege. That is RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. That's right, 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. Rocco Becht or Ethan Grunkemeyer. That's just one domino. But Ty Howle going to Virginia Tech, that is also somewhat of a sign because now there's a tight ends coach vacancy. And it also might be an indicator that Penn State's also going to get an offensive coordinator out of this. So let's break it down. Okay, so you have Ethan Grunkemeyer and Rocco Becht. Which one should Penn State go with? Well, because it's not just about Rocco Becht. 1 year Rocco Becht versus Ethan Grunkemeyer for the next 3 years. Now this is contingent on if Penn State can get both Becht and Alex Manske from Iowa State. So now it's more of a conversation of Ethan Grunkemeyer for the next 3 years or the Iowa State quarterback depth chart for the next 3 years. next 3 years plus. Beck would be the 1-year holdover because he's a redshirt senior. He's got his final year of eligibility. Alex Manske is the key because I am not trading 3 years of Ethan Grunkemeyer for 1 year of Rocco Beck. I think Grunkemeyer's ceiling is much higher than what Beck can give you for 1 year. So I'm playing the long game if I'm Penn State. And if Alex Manske is interested in going somewhere else, he thinks he's starting caliber, he doesn't want to sit for another year, then I don't blame him. But he is the key in this conversation. It's not a direct comparison and a 1v1. So now Penn State should really consider, okay, if we're going to lose Grunkemeyer to Virginia Tech, or maybe Grunk goes somewhere else. Maybe you could at the end of the day. He was recruited by a lot of schools. Former top 10 quarterback. Par for the course, right? Manske and Beck together give you a QB depth chart. Manske was a highly touted prospect once upon a time in his own right. True freshman this past season, so he'll be a redshirt. So kind of similar timeline again where, okay, you'll get Beck. Then you get 3 years from Manske potentially. And if all goes well and continues his development, right? But Penn State's quarterback depth chart, it is a little questionable at this point in time. Okay, so you have Ethan Grunkemeyer. Does Beckham Kritza stay? How's Beckham Kritza developing? He was injured for most of this season, and he was a high potential and was underrated. Was he underrated? He was a pretty low 3-star. You have Peyton Falzone that comes in. So your current depth chart with Grunkemeyer, Kritza, and Falzone, if Grunkemeyer goes down, I don't know what reliable options Penn State has at that point in time. If you go with Beck, if you go with Manske, and then Falzone, okay, you at least have a little more reliability from those 3 names going forward. And maybe Penn State entertains another backup in the transfer portal, right? I think they probably do that even if they stick with Ethan Grunkemeyer. They try to find somebody else too. So I think Penn State's going to be just fine losing these coaches, potentially losing these players. Now let's get to the part of the equation with the tight end room. Because now there's an available spot for the tight ends coach. Well, conveniently enough, and maybe this is the indicator that we need to follow, Taylor Mauser. He's been the offensive coordinator now at Iowa State for 2 seasons. He has a good track record for developing tight ends. More importantly, he's the offensive coordinator. So if Matt Campbell and Andy Kotelnicki, hey, they're going to part ways. Remember, Kotelnicki is under contract here, but we could see a quick turnaround where Taylor Mauser comes in, he becomes the tight ends coach. More importantly, he becomes the offensive coordinator. Iowa State's offense wasn't exactly this juggernaut, but again, under the circumstances, and you get a better supporting cast now with the war chest that Matt Campbell has to work with, we could see Taylor Mauser take a step forward as a coordinator, as a play caller. And again, they've had, to this point, a strong track record of their own right, of developing tight ends. Benjamin Brahmer has eligibility, could come over. Gabe Burkle. My preference is Andrew Rappleyea and Luke Reynolds because I've watched them play football in person. I know their style of game. But Burkle and Brahmer is that 1-2 punch where if you get them in the portal, again, a lot of this is speculation, but you would at least have something to offset these losses if you do happen to move on from Rappleyea and Reynolds, respectively. Same thing with Grunk. So that is how Penn State will respond. Getting the equivalent or close enough to an equivalent of the caliber of coach and the caliber of player over from Iowa State. And there's so many names in the transfer portal. Even if it's not a direct A to B player moves on, you replace him with this former Iowa State player. There are going to be tons of former 4-star and 5-star players that are going to enter the transfer portal. Penn State has the resources to be competitive. They know they're going to have to use the transfer portal. They might find a completely different tight end that we haven't even named at this point, or could even speculate to begin with, because we don't know who's every single name that's going to be that's going to enter their name and entertain Penn State as an option here. Somebody that Matt Campbell recruited once upon a time, was close to committing to Iowa State, and then never did. So that's how Penn State will respond, as they have contingency plans. Preference? Keep Grunkemeyer. I think he has more upside. He's a little more proven long-term than an Alex Manske, because that's what you're banking on if you're going to go with the quarterback depth chart. Same thing with Rappleyea and Luke Reynolds. I think they are better players by comparison to the Iowa State tight end duo, but it's not going to be a significant drop-off if they do happen to go get those players. So, and more assistant coaches as well. I would really like to see Penn State hire Noah Pauley. I've already shared my thoughts in previous episodes about Noah Pauley. He is the wide receivers coach and passing game coordinator at Iowa State. That would be the home run hire at this point. If you have to hire any assistant coach, I think you circle Noah Pauley at this point, because he's the real deal with how he was able to develop at Iowa State. The one thing about Matt Campbell and this group, Derek Hoosier, the player, he's going to be the general manager for Penn State. And some of these assistant coaches, they have a special talent for evaluating talent from afar and then developing them. So that's going to be key. And you have more resources to go get higher end caliber players. That is where we're going to wrap things up on this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the show. Like this episode, share it with friends and family. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. If you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around all of your favorite Penn State sports teams.